This lesson is about even and odd functions. If you look at the two graphs that you're given here, we're looking at information that will tell us whether the function is even, odd, or neither. There are a few things about even functions. They're symmetric about the y-axis. That means if we fold the graph on the y-axis, we get two equal parts. Or in other words, it's a reflection over the y-axis. So this little part of my parabola is actually perfectly repeated or reflected over here on this side. So if it's even, it can be reflected over the y-axis. Also, if it's even, if you plug in a negative value for x or a positive value for x, both of the function values are going to be the same. Odd functions, on the other hand, mean that they're symmetric about the origin. So if this is our x and our, or I should say our y and our x-axis, when you fold this, it means that you're going to essentially fold it over both the y-axis, and then you would fold this part here over the x-axis. And so what that means is it's symmetric about the origin. So really it's a reflection of the x and the y-axis. And what happens is if you actually put in a opposite of x, so if x is positive 2 and you put a negative 2 in it, then the whole function will result in an opposite value of what was original. So let's look at how this applies. Even, odd, or neither. So two ways you can look at this. First, we could just go ahead and put a negative x in. And any place that you see an x, we could put a negative in place of it. So we have negative x to the fourth minus 2. Well, if you think of it, a negative times a negative times a negative times a negative is going to be positive. And so that would be positive x to the fourth if I actually simplified this out, minus 2. Look at this compared to the original function. X to the fourth and x to the fourth match. Negative 2 and negative 2 match. They're exactly the same. So no matter whether I put in a positive x or a negative x, a value or its opposite, the function value is still going to be the same. Let's look at that in terms of numbers. So if we had, let's put in a negative 1. Actually, let's start with positive 1. G of positive 1 is equal to, we'll put a 1 in place of all our x's here. 1 to the fourth minus 2. Or 1 to the fourth is 1. 1 minus 2 is negative 1. Now, if I put in a negative 1, the opposite of this number, then I would have negative 1 to the fourth minus 2, which if you put negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1, you're still going to get positive 1 minus 2, which is negative 1. So notice that these values are exactly the same no matter whether you have a positive x or a negative x. What that means if we're graphing it is if you were graphing the point 1 comma negative 1, then for its reflection you would have negative 1, 1, and notice that these would be reflected points over that y-axis. So we'll compare that to a function like this one here, in which if we put in our negative x, let's see what happens. We have 4 times negative x cubed plus 2 times negative x. So when we clean that up, this negative x times negative x times negative x is actually going to be negative x cubed. And if we multiply that times 4, it's really going to be negative 4x cubed. And then 2 times negative x would be negative 2x. Well, look at this compared to the original function. Both the 4x cubed and negative 4x cubed are opposites, as well as the 2x's are opposites. So when everything is an opposite, that's what we call as an odd function. I don't even know if I actually even told you before that the previous function was even, so I apologize for that. This is an odd function. What you can then do is you can try this out with numbers if you prefer and put a number in. So if we did 4 times 1 cubed plus 2 times 1, let's see what it equals. That would be equal to 4 plus 2, which is 6. You could compare that and see what happens if you put a negative 1 in, so the opposite of this value. So we would have 4 times negative 1 cubed plus 2 times negative 1. That would give me, this piece here would give me negative 4, and this piece right here would give me negative 2, which is negative 6. So now notice that our values are opposite. So let's look at that in terms of a graph. When they're opposite, by the way, still an odd function. So if I were to plot the point 1 comma 6, so 1, 6, and then if I plot this point negative 1, negative 6, Notice that I could reflect it across the y-axis and then reflect that over the x-axis, and that's the point I would get. Also, notice that this one here was at +1, +6, and we found the opposite of both of those down here for this point. So odd function, when you plug in a number and then you plug in its opposite, everything turns out opposite in the function. That's what makes it odd. If you plug it in and you get 6 and 6 here, then you're dealing with even. And then if you get two different numbers, let's say like 6 and 8, then it's going to be neither odd nor even.